Hey, welcome back. So, the title of this mini lecture is The 1990s in American History. And we're going to talk about 5 things that you need to know as you go to read more and to learn more about this particular topic. There's a lot to this, so let's get into it. All right, first one, Gulf War One. So, late 80s, early 90s, the Ba'athist Party is governing and ruling Iraq. Iraq is in the midst of the Iran-Iraq War, and the United States is going to be successful against the Soviet Union and basically win the Cold War. With that, you have an effort on the part of the United States to maintain global presence, but a real sense of not sure what's happening, what's going on, do we still need this big military or not? And between 89, 90, 91, Saddam Hussein will begin a process of trying to consolidate his authority, to expand his authority, and will bring Iraqi troops into Kuwait and threaten the Kuwaiti people, and then also, the Saudis. And what will come of that is a decision on the part of George Bush, the President of the United States, that there needs to be, at the minimum, international pressure put on the Iraqi government and possibly military action. So you have military operations that are undertaken, Operation Desert Shield, and then eventually Operation Desert Storm, where the United States works with its allies to eventually stage an invasion of Iraq, through Kuwait. And this is a relatively small conflict, but it's known as the 100-Hour War. This is the ground war. But the first Gulf War, all right, first Gulf War. Second, globalization. All right, globalization. First off, globalization is not new by any stretch of the imagination. All right, it existed in the days of the Romans, the Chinese. You've got globalization in different iterations all across the history of the world. The 90s made it a little different because of the new technologies and what you could achieve with it. So globalization generally is the idea of global interconnectivity and the role of the individual, right? What one person can do. For example, now in 2020, I have a great deal of ability in terms of what I can accomplish with a smartphone. Now, in the 90s, with the rise of the internet and personal computing, again, the role of the individual as opposed to the role of institutions became greater. And part of this also brings us to number 3, which is NAFTA. So global trade and free trade was on the rise in the 90s in the aftermath of the era of the Cold War. All right, so NAFTA, which dominated the North American trading for nearly 20 years, is referred to as the North American Free Trade Agreement. All right, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Number 4, the internet. I know, it's amazing, but although it didn't get created in the 90s, and no, Al Gore didn't invent it, the internet was, by the time you get to the 1990s, and particularly the second half of the decade, something that you start to see greater access to, greater use of, and as technology gets better in terms of how one can access it, what you can ultimately do with it. The kinds of technologies that exist in the early 90s wouldn't have been able to support, say, for example, looking at a YouTube mini lecture, but by the end of the 90s and again early 2000s, right, the transformation of the role of the internet in your everyday life is going to be a big thing. All right, number 5, Monica Lewinsky. All right, Monica Lewinsky. So in 1992, Bill Clinton, the governor of Arkansas, is going to be elected president of the United States. Clinton is certainly a figure who is beloved by some and is utterly loathed by others. In the second half of his presidency, during his second term, Clinton had an affair with a young woman, a young intern in her 20s named Monica Lewinsky. He lied about it, tried to cover it up. And there was an attempt to impeach him. He's impeached. It's moved to the Senate. The decision is made not to remove him from power, and he's not removed. But Monica Lewinsky was the woman that he had had an affair with, was the young woman who he had an affair with. Lewinsky was reviled in the press, was the butt of jokes for months and months, years, and was really mistreated. Of course, in the United States. So I think she's an important individual for how we think about the role of women in public life, the role of men in relationships to power, obviously the rise of the Me Too movement in recent years, right? There's a lot of different factors when it comes to thinking about someone like Monica Lewinsky. All right, thanks so much.